Groom wanted to humiliate his ex at the wedding, but she shows up with triplets who look just like him. Brandon Miller smiled maliciously while adjusting his tie for the third time that morning. Today would be the perfect day to show Jennifer how much he had prospered without her, by inviting her to witness his marriage to Ashley, daughter of one of the wealthiest families in Denver. That's when he heard the growing murmur at the church entrance. Turning toward the main door, his smile turned into an expression of absolute panic. There was Jennifer, elegant in a golden dress that enhanced her natural beauty, walking calmly down the church aisles. But she wasn't alone. 3 small children accompanied her, all dressed in golden tones that perfectly matched their mother's dress. 2 little girls with curly blonde hair and a boy with delicate features walked hand in hand with her, waving innocently at the surprised guests. Brandon's heart stopped when his eyes met the children's little faces, the same brown eyes he saw in the mirror every day, the same nose shape, the same chin dimple that had marked his appearance since childhood. "My God," whispered Ashley beside him, following the groom's gaze. "Brandon, who are these children?" The question echoed in his mind like thunder. How could he explain that he had spent the last 5 years pretending those children didn't exist? How could he confess that he knew about Jennifer's pregnancy from the start, but chose to abandon her to pursue a more comfortable life? Father Michael, who had known Brandon since he was a child, noticed the immediate tension that spread across the altar. The guests began whispering among themselves, discreetly pointing out the obvious resemblances between the groom and the 3 children now occupying the front pew. "Daddy!" shouted the youngest girl, Lily, recognizing Brandon even after so long. She let go of Jennifer's hand and ran toward the altar, her little golden shoes echoing on the church marble. The silence that followed was deafening. Ashley covered her mouth with her hands, her eyes filling with tears as she understood the situation. Mrs. Barbara, the bride's mother and one of the most influential women in Denver society, turned pale with anger. "Brandon," Ashley's voice trembled, "explain to me what's going on. Now." But Brandon couldn't speak. His throat had completely dried up seeing Jennifer approach with the other 2 children, Ethan and Sophie. She maintained a serene smile, as if nothing extraordinary were happening. "Hi, Brandon," said Jennifer softly, her voice carrying a dignity he didn't remember noticing before. "Thanks for the invitation." The kids were very excited when they heard they were going to meet their father in person. The bomb had exploded. Mrs. Barbara stood up abruptly, her blue silk dress fluttering with her indignation. Brandon's relatives, including his own parents, stared open-mouthed at the scene unfolding before them. "Ashley, we're leaving right now," declared Mrs. Barbara. But Ashley didn't move. Her eyes were fixed on Brandon, waiting for an explanation he couldn't formulate. Mr. Robert, Brandon's father and owner of a small auto repair shop, stood up slowly. He had noticed something familiar in the children's features, but now the truth hit him like a punch in the stomach. "Son," his voice was heavy with disappointment, "are these my grandchildren?" The moment his father asked the question was like the final drop that made the glass overflow. Brandon finally found his voice, but it came out weak and trembling. "Dad, I can explain." "No need to explain," interrupted Jennifer, her calmness contrasting with the chaos around them. "I came here because Ethan asks about his father every week. Sophie draws families with Daddy at school. And Lily always asks why Daddy doesn't come home." Each word from Jennifer was like a stab to Brandon Miller's chest. Ashley began crying silently, finally understanding that the man she was about to marry had abandoned 3 small children. Mrs. Barbara tried again to pull her daughter away, but Ashley refused to move. She needed to hear the full truth, no matter how painful it was. "Ashley, let's leave this scandal," insisted Mrs. Barbara. "No, Mother. I need to know the truth," replied Ashley, her tears smudging her makeup. "Brandon, how long have you known about these children?" The direct question forced Brandon to face the reality he had tried to hide for so long. He looked at Jennifer, who stood with impressive dignity holding Ethan and Sophie's hands, while Lily remained at the top of the altar steps. "Since forever," he finally admitted, his voice almost inaudible. The impact of those 2 words reverberated throughout the entire church. Mrs. Barbara turned pale. The guests gasped audibly. Ashley covered her face with her hands, sobbing. Mr. Roberts slowly approached the children, his eyes filling with tears as he recognized his own features in the grandchildren he had never met. Mrs. Dorothy, his wife, followed with trembling steps. "My God," murmured Mrs. Dorothy upon seeing Lily up close. "She has Brandon's eyes when he was little." Jennifer watched the children's paternal grandparents approach with genuine emotion. She had dreamed of this moment for years, imagining what it would be like if Brandon's family ever met their children. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out now continuing. "Are you my grandchildren?" asked Mrs. Dorothy, kneeling to be at the children's level. "Yes, Grandma," replied Sophie with the typical innocence of a 5-year-old. "Mum always said we'd meet you someday, Mrs. Dorothy's heart broke and filled with love at the same time. She hugged all 3 children, while Mr. Robert fought back his own tears. Father Michael, realizing the ceremony couldn't continue in that state, discreetly signaled for everyone to calm down. "Perhaps it would be best to take a break so the families can talk," the priest suggested diplomatically. But Ashley didn't want a break. She wanted answers. She approached Jennifer, drying her tears with a tissue. "Please," Ashley said, "tell me what happened. I need to know the truth." Jennifer looked at Ashley with genuine compassion. She too had been deceived, also a victim of Brandon's lies. "We dated for 2 years, began Jennifer, her voice calm but filled with emotion. "When I found out I was pregnant with triplets, he disappeared, changed his phone number, his address, left me completely alone." But he told me he was never serious with anyone before me," Ashley sobbed. "He lied to you too," Jennifer replied gently. "He proposed to me a week before I found out about the pregnancy. We had even set the date." The revelation hit Ashley like lightning. Brandon had used the same words, made the same promises. She turned to face him, but he couldn't meet her gaze. Mrs. Barbara, realizing the extent of Brandon's lies, finally understood that her daughter had escaped a huge mistake. But the public humiliation still deeply bothered her. "Ashley, we're leaving immediately," she ordered once more. "No, Mother." Ashley wiped her tears and straightened up. "I want to hear everything, every detail." Tyler Johnson, Brandon's best friend and best man at the wedding, nervously approached. He had carried a weight on his conscience for years and couldn't bear to keep the secret any longer. "Ashley," Tyler called out hesitantly, "I need to tell you something." "Go ahead, Tyler," Ashley replied, noticing the young man's nervousness. "I knew about the children. I ran into Jennifer at the market 2 years ago. I saw the triplets. Brandon paid me to keep quiet." Tyler's confession was the last straw. Ashley finally exploded with anger, turning to Brandon furiously. "You paid your friends to lie to me? What kind of monster are you?" Brandon tried to approach her, but Ashley stepped back. "Ashley, I can explain everything." "Explain what?" she shouted. "That you abandoned 3 babies? That you lied to me throughout our entire relationship? That you used our marriage for what? To climb the social ladder?" Ashley's final question hit the heart of the matter. Brandon had chosen her not out of love, but for the social and financial position the marriage would give him. The truth was finally being revealed to everyone. Mrs. Barbara, despite her initial anger, began to feel sorry for Jennifer's situation. Seeing a single mother raising triplets alone touched something deep in her maternal heart. "My dear," she addressed Jennifer, "how did you manage to raise those children alone?" Jennifer took a deep breath before answering. Telling her story was always difficult, but she wasn't ashamed of the struggle she had faced. "I worked 3 jobs during the first years," Jennifer began. "In the morning I cleaned offices, in the afternoon I cared for the elderly, at night I studied accounting by correspondence. My neighbors helped look after the children when I couldn't be home." Jennifer's account created a respectful silence in the church. Even the most critical guests couldn't help but admire her determination and courage. Ashley looked at Brandon with even more contempt. While Jennifer struggled alone to support 3 children, he lived comfortably, spending money on expensive restaurants and trips to impress his new girlfriend. "And I was complaining that he didn't take me traveling every week," Ashley murmured to herself, realizing how shallow her perspective had been. Robert approached his son, his expression mixing disappointment and anger. "My son, how could you do this? How could you abandon your own children?" "Dad, I was young. I was scared." "Don't give me excuses," interrupted Mr. Robert. "Jennifer was young too, and she didn't run away from responsibility." The comparison stung Brandon deeply. He had spent years convincing himself he had made the right choice, but now he clearly saw the cowardice of his actions. Mrs. Dorothy approached Jennifer with tears in her eyes. "My dear, forgive me for my son abandoning you. You raised these beautiful children alone, and I didn't even know they existed." "You're not to blame for anything," Jennifer replied kindly. "I always dreamed that one day you would meet your grandchildren." The conversation between Jennifer and the children's grandparents was being watched by everyone in the church. The difference between Jennifer's dignity and Brandon's cowardice became increasingly evident. Lily, who was still at the altar, timidly approached Brandon. "Daddy, why did you never come visit me?" she asked with the innocence of a 5-year-old. Lily's simple question echoed through the silent church, breaking the hearts of all who heard it. Brandon knelt to be at his daughter's eye level, his own tears beginning to well up. "Daddy made a very big mistake, my princess," he said, his voice choked. "But can you come play with me now?" insisted Lily, still not understanding the complexity of the situation. Ashley watched the interaction between father and daughter with a broken heart. She saw the genuine pain in Brandon's eyes, but also understood that he had consciously chosen to ignore that pain for years. Ethan and Sophie approached too, curious about this man their mother always said was their father. "Daddy, why are you so tall?" asked Ethan, looking up at Brandon. "And why are you crying?" added Sophie, concerned. The children's innocent questions made the situation even more emotional. Brandon was finally face to face with the consequences of his choices, represented by 3 little faces that mirrored his own features. Attorney David Parker, the lawyer for Ashley's family who was present at the ceremony, discreetly approached Mrs. Barbara. "Barbara," he murmured, "I need to inform you about the legal implications of this situation." "What implications?" asked Mrs. Barbara, still trying to process all the events. "These children are entitled to back child support from birth. With interest and adjustments, we're talking about a considerable amount." The additional legal information made Mrs. Barbara even more relieved that her daughter had discovered the truth before signing the marriage papers. Brandon wasn't just a liar. He would also be a significant financial burden. Ashley overheard the conversation between her mother and the attorney, and it made her realize another dimension of Brandon's lies. "Brandon," she called to him, interrupting his conversation with the children, "what is your real financial situation?" The direct question made Brandon even more uncomfortable. He had lied about that too, exaggerating his financial stability to impress Ashley and her family. "Well, it's complicated." "Not complicated," interrupted Ashley. "Either you have money or you don't. And apparently now you'll have to support 3 children. Money you never mentioned having when you talked about our future plans." The pressure was mounting from all sides. Brandon found himself cornered between his past lies and present responsibilities he could no longer avoid. Jennifer watched everything with a calm that impressed everyone. She had come to the church with a specific purpose, and was seeing that purpose fulfilled in a way she had never imagined. "Jennifer," Ashley addressed her again, "why did you come today? What did you want to achieve with this?" "Honestly," Jennifer took a deep breath, "I wanted the children to meet their father before it was too late. Lily has been asking about him every week. Ethan draws families with daddies at school. Sophie always asks why all the other kids have daddies and she doesn't." The account moved even the most skeptical guests. Nobody could criticize a mother who wanted to give her children the chance to know their father. "But I also wanted," Jennifer continued, "for him to finally take responsibility, not for the money. I've managed on my own until now, but these children deserve to know who their father is." Jennifer's sincerity and dignity created a stark contrast with Brandon's behavior. Ashley realized she was witnessing the difference between a person of integrity and one who had lost their moral compass. Father Michael, who had remained silent observing the entire situation, finally spoke up. "I believe this ceremony should be postponed," he said diplomatically. There are important matters that need to be resolved before any sacred commitment can be made. The priest's official statement sealed the marriage's fate. Ashley nodded, completely agreeing with the decision. Mrs. Barbara, despite the public scandal, felt relief that her daughter had escaped a marriage based on lies. "Ashley, let's go home," she said, this time with kindness. "You need to process all this." But Ashley didn't want to leave yet. She approached Jennifer one last time. "Jennifer, I want you to know I had no idea about any of this. If I had known—" "You were deceived too," Jennifer interrupted with compassion. "You're not to blame for anything. In fact, I'm glad you found out before marrying him." Jennifer's generous gesture toward Ashley showed everyone her true character. Even though she had been abandoned and humiliated, she held no grudge against an innocent person. Ashley removed the engagement ring and placed it in Brandon's hand. "I can't marry a man who abandons his own children," she said firmly. "This engagement is over." Ashley's public declaration echoed through the church, definitively sealing the end of the relationship. Brandon held the ring, realizing he had lost everything in a matter of minutes. The guests gradually began leaving the church, murmuring among themselves about the scandal they had witnessed. Some looked at Brandon with contempt, others with pity. Mr. Robert and Mrs. Dorothy approached Jennifer again. "Sweetheart," said Mrs. Dorothy, "we would very much like to get to know our grandchildren better. Would you allow them to visit us?" "Of course," Jennifer replied with a smile. "They've always wanted to meet their grandparents." The children's joy upon hearing they could visit their grandparents was contagious. Finally, they would have the extended family they had always wanted. Brandon watched his ex-fiancée leave the church with her family, his parents chatting animatedly with Jennifer about future visits, and his 3 daughters playing in the first pew of the church. He was completely alone. Tyler approached his friend, feeling guilty for having kept the secret for so long. "Brandon, man, I'm sorry. I should have convinced you to do the right thing from the start." "It's not your fault, Tyler," Brandon replied, still processing everything that had happened. "The blame is mine alone." It was the first time in years that Brandon had taken full responsibility for his actions without trying to blame other people or circumstances. Jennifer was preparing to leave the church with the children when Brandon called to her. "Jennifer, wait." She turned, curious about what he had to say after all these years of silence. "I know I have no right to ask for anything," Brandon began, "but would you give me a chance to get to know my children better, for real this time?" Jennifer looked at him for a long moment, assessing his sincerity. "You'd have to prove you've changed," she finally said. "It's not just about showing up when it's convenient. Being a father is an everyday commitment." "I know," Brandon nodded, "and I want to learn. I want to be the father they deserve." The conversation between them didn't go unnoticed by the children, who watched hopefully. "Does that mean Daddy will come play with us?" Sophie asked excitedly. "Little by little, Princess," Jennifer replied. "Daddy needs to learn first how to be a real father." The condition set by Jennifer was fair and necessary. Brandon would have to prove through actions, not just words, that he was truly committed to fatherhood. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing, now in the days following the scandal at the church, the news spread quickly throughout Denver. Brandon became the topic of every conversation, criticized for how he had abandoned his children. Ashley, meanwhile, was dealing with her own emotional roller coaster. Despite the pain of betrayal, she felt relieved to have discovered the truth before getting married. "Mom," Ashley said to Mrs. Barbara during dinner, "I still can't believe I was so blind all this time." "Daughter, people like Brandon are experts at lying," replied Mrs. Barbara. "He deceived you because you trust people. That's not a flaw." Meanwhile, Jennifer was adjusting her routine to include visits from the children's paternal grandparents. Mr. Robert and Mrs. Dorothy had instantly fallen in love with their grandchildren and wanted to make up for lost time. "Grandpa Robert, can you teach me how to fix toy cars?" asked Ethan during a visit to the workshop. "Of course I can, my little grandson," answered Mr. Robert, moved by finally having the chance to teach his grandson something. The girls were also enchanted by Mrs. Dorothy, who taught them how to bake cookies and embroider small designs. "Grandma Dorothy, why did Daddy never tell us about you?" Lily asked innocently. The question left Mrs. Dorothy speechless. How could she explain to a 5-year-old that their own father had hidden their existence? "Sometimes adults make mistakes, my princess," she replied diplomatically. "But what matters is that we're all together now." Brandon, meanwhile, was facing the practical consequences of his choices. Besides the social humiliation, he had to deal with legal issues related to child support. The lawyer he managed to hire got straight to the point. "Mr. Brandon, you owe 5 years of child support for 3 children. With interest and monetary adjustments, we're talking about a considerable debt." "But I didn't know," Brandon began. "Sorry, sir, the court doesn't accept ignorance as a defense when there's evidence that the father knew about the paternity," the lawyer interrupted. "And from what I understand, several people can testify that you knew about the children." The financial reality hit Brandon like a bucket of cold water. He had spent all his resources trying to maintain a lifestyle that would impress Ashley and her family, and now he found himself in debt. Jennifer, on the other hand, was experiencing unexpected positive changes in her life. Some people who were at the church that day were impressed by her dignity and began offering real job opportunities. "Jennifer," said Carly, owner of an accounting firm who had witnessed the whole scene, "I was impressed by your composure that day. Would you like to work with me? I have a perfect position for someone with your qualifications." The job offer was better than anything Jennifer had managed to get before. Ironically, the moment Brandon had planned to humiliate her had turned into the door to a better life. "I accept," Jennifer replied without hesitation. "When can I start?" "Monday," Carly smiled. "And don't worry about schedules. I know you have 3 children. We can be flexible." Carly's understanding and flexibility deeply touched Jennifer. It was the first time in years that someone had considered her needs as a single mother when offering a job. Brandon, upon learning about the positive changes in Jennifer's life through his parents, felt a mix of guilt and admiration. She had managed to thrive, despite all the obstacles he had placed in her path. Ashley, for her part, was focusing on her own emotional recovery. The cancelled wedding had been traumatic, but she was starting to see it as a liberation. "I was so focused on the idea of being a perfect wife that I forgot to pay attention to the kind of man I was choosing," she confessed to her best friend, Rachel. "At least you found out before signing the papers," Rachel replied. "Imagine if you had discovered after you were married." Rachel's perspective helped Ashley process the situation better. She had truly escaped a big problem. Meanwhile, Brandon was trying to gradually get closer to the children as Jennifer had allowed. His first visits were supervised and limited, but he was determined to prove his sincerity. "Daddy, why are you so nervous?" asked Sophie during one of the visits, noticing that Brandon seemed uncomfortable. "It's just that I don't really know how to be a dad," Brandon admitted honestly. "Can you teach me?" The question touched the children, who were excited about the idea of teaching something to their father. They began showing him their favorite toys, their school drawings, their preferred songs. Ethan, always observant, asked something that caught Brandon by surprise. "Daddy, why didn't you live with us before?" "Because I made wrong choices, son," replied Brandon, trying to be honest without frightening the child. "But now I want to learn how to make the right ones." Brandon's honesty, though limited by the children's age, was being noticed by Jennifer. She watched every interaction, evaluating whether he was truly changing. Mr. Robert was having serious conversations with his son about responsibility and character. "My son," he said during a visit to the workshop, "you have a second chance that many men don't get. Don't waste it." "I know, Dad. I want to do things right this time." "Doing things right isn't just showing up for visits when it's convenient," continued Mr. Robert. "It's being there when they're sick, when they're sad, when they need help with homework." His father's advice was helping Brandon understand the real dimension of fatherhood. It wasn't a role to be played, it was a lifelong commitment. Mrs. Dorothy was becoming a constant presence in the children's lives, helping Jennifer with small things and enjoying every moment with her grandchildren. "Jennifer," she said one afternoon, "I want you to know that no matter what happens between you and Brandon, we'll always consider you part of our family." "Thank you, Mrs. Dorothy," replied Jennifer, moved. That means a lot to me and the children." The genuine acceptance from the paternal grandparents was giving the children something they'd never had before, an extended family that loved them unconditionally. Ashley was gradually resuming her social life, but now with a completely different perspective on relationships. "I've learned that it's no use for someone to be professionally successful if they lack character," she commented during a dinner with friends. Her friends agreed, many of them reflecting on their own relationships after witnessing Brandon's scandal. "What impressed me the most," continued Ashley, "was Jennifer's dignity. She could have caused a much bigger scandal, but she maintained her elegance the entire time." Ashley's admiration for Jennifer was genuine. She had recognized in Brandon's ex-girlfriend qualities that she herself aspired to have. Brandon was discovering that being a father was much more complex than he had imagined. The children had distinct personalities, different needs, and required different kinds of attention. Lily was the most affectionate, always wanting to be held and given kisses. Sophie was curious and asked thousands of questions about everything. Ethan was more reserved, observing his father cautiously before opening up completely. "Daddy," said Ethan during a visit, "are you going to leave again?" The boy's direct question hit Brandon deeply. He realized the children were still afraid of being abandoned again. "No, Ethan, I'm not leaving anymore. I might not live in the same house as you, but I'll always be your daddy." "Promise?" "I promise." The promise to Ethan was a turning point for Brandon. For the first time, he was making a commitment he intended to honor completely. Jennifer observed the interaction between father and son and saw something she hadn't expected, genuine emotion in Brandon's eyes. Maybe he was truly changing. Carly, Jennifer's new employer, was impressed with her dedication and competence. "Jennifer," she said after a few weeks of work, "you have a natural talent for organization. Would you consider a promotion?" The promotion offer came at the perfect time. With the new job, Jennifer was finally able to provide a better life for the children without relying on the alimony that Brandon was still trying to sort out. "I accept," Jennifer replied, "and thank you for believing in me." "It's easy to believe in someone who shows such strength and determination," Carly answered. The professional recognition was giving Jennifer a confidence she hadn't felt in years. She was finally reaping the rewards of all the effort she had invested. Ashley, meanwhile, was considering moving to another city to start over, in a place where she wasn't known as the bride who was humiliated at the altar. "My dear," said Mrs. Barbara, "you don't need to run away. You did nothing wrong." "I know, Mom, but I want to start fresh, away from all these memories." "Then let's go together. I'm ready for a change too." The decision of mother and daughter to start anew together elsewhere was a healthy way to process the trauma and move forward. Brandon was facing his own necessary changes. He had lost several clients after the scandal, forcing him to completely rethink his professional approach. "Maybe it's an opportunity to start something new," suggested Tyler, who remained his friend despite everything. "You're right," Brandon agreed. "I need to build something based on honesty this time." The professional crisis was forcing Brandon to confront his values and priorities. He was beginning to understand that real success didn't come just from money or social status. The children were adapting well to the new family dynamic. They had their mother's unconditional love, the affection of their paternal grandparents, and were now gradually getting to know their father. "Mommy," Lily said one night before bed, "I think our daddy is learning to be a real dad." "Why do you think that, my princess?" "Because today he remembered I like strawberry ice cream, and last time he forgot." Lily's innocent observation showed that the children were paying attention to details, noticing when Brandon actually cared to remember their preferences. Jennifer smiled upon hearing her daughter's comment. Maybe Brandon was genuinely making an effort to get to know the children. Mrs. Dorothy was becoming an important confidant for Jennifer, offering maternal advice and emotional support. "Jennifer," she said one afternoon, "I want you to know that no matter what Brandon does or doesn't do, you can always count on us." "Mrs. Dorothy, you've already done so much for it." "Nonsense. You're our family now, and family takes care of family." The sense of belonging that Mrs. Dorothy was offering was something Jennifer had never fully experienced before. She had raised the children practically alone, without the support of an extended family. Brandon was discovering aspects of his children's personalities that constantly surprised him. Ethan had a natural talent for drawing, creating detailed figures that were impressive for a 5-year-old. Sophie showed an early interest in numbers and patterns. Lily had an extraordinary ability to memorize songs and stories. "They're brilliant children," he commented to Jennifer after a particularly revealing visit. "They always have been," Jennifer replied. "You're just getting to know them now." Jennifer's response, though factual, carried significant emotional weight. Brandon had missed the first 5 years of his children's lives, crucial years for development and bonding. Ashley was adjusting well to life without Brandon. The initial pain had given way to a sense of liberation and self-discovery. "You know," she said to Rachel, "I don't think I was ever really in love with him. I was in love with the idea of a perfect marriage. And now? Now I want to meet someone I can feel something real for, not just convenient." The emotional maturity Ashley was developing was a direct result of the traumatic yet revealing experience she had gone through. Mr. Robert was teaching Ethan about basic mechanics, using simple terms the child could understand. "Grandpa, why do cars need oil?" asked Ethan, his small hands trying to hold a wrench. "Because without oil the parts rub against each other and wear out quickly," explained Mr. Robert patiently. "Like when Sophie and I fight and get upset." "Exactly, my grandson. That's why it's important to take care of things and the people we love." The simple but profound analogy was teaching Ethan much more than mechanics. It was teaching him about relationships and care. Jennifer was impressed with the positive impact the grandparents were having on the children's lives. They were more confident, happier, with a sense of belonging they had never experienced before. "You've changed our lives," she told Mr. Robert and Mrs. Dorothy during a visit. "You've changed ours too," replied Mrs. Dorothy. "We didn't realize how much we were missing by not knowing our grandchildren." Brandon was struggling with his own confused feelings. Part of him felt genuine guilt for what he had done. Part of him was afraid he wouldn't be able to be a good father, and part of him felt something he didn't initially recognize: real, paternal love. "Tyler," he said to his friend, "I think I'm starting to understand what I've lost all these years." "What do you mean?" "It's not just about the children growing up without me. It's about me missing the chance to know them, to be part of their lives from the beginning." Brandon's understanding of his own loss was marking the beginning of a real change in his perspective. The children were starting to naturally refer to Brandon as Dad in their daily conversations, something that deeply touched both him and Jennifer. "Dad promised to teach me how to ride a bike," Sophie casually commented during dinner. "Really?" replied Jennifer, surprised by the commitment. "Yes. He said every father teaches his child to ride a bike." The natural way Sophie spoke about her father showed that the children were finally incorporating Brandon into their lives organically. Mrs. Barbara was following Ashley's healing process with maternal attention. "How are you feeling today, dear?" "Better, Mum. Each day gets a little easier, and I'm starting to see this as a liberation, not a loss." "That's good. You deserve someone who truly values you." The conversation between mother and daughter reflected the emotional progress Ashley was making, transforming pain into personal growth. Brandon was discovering that genuinely connecting with the children required much more than simply showing up for visits. He needed to be emotionally present and willing to learn about them. "Dad," said Lily during a game, "do you know what my favorite color is?" "Pink?" guessed Brandon. "No, it's yellow, like the dress I wore at your wedding." Lily's gentle correction reminded Brandon that he still had a lot to learn about his children's preferences and personalities. Jennifer was watching these interactions carefully, assessing whether Brandon was truly committed or if it was just a passing phase driven by guilt. The answer came when Brandon showed up at Jennifer's door on a rainy Sunday, completely drenched. "What happened to you?" asked Jennifer, surprised. "My car broke down on the way, but I promised Ethan I'd come today, so I ran here." Brandon's gesture, arriving soaked because he had promised to be there, impressed Jennifer. It was the first time she had seen him prioritizing a commitment with the children over his own convenience. "Come in, you're soaked," she said, making room for him to enter. "Daddy," shouted the 3 children when they saw him, running to hug him without caring about his wet clothes. In that moment, watching Brandon hug his children, wet and happy, Jennifer saw something she hadn't expected, a man who was genuinely trying to redeem himself. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out, now continuing. Ashley was beginning a new chapter in New York City, where she had gotten a job at an architecture firm. The move was proving beneficial for her emotional recovery. "How's the adjustment going?" asked Mrs. Barbara during a phone call. "Better than I expected, Mom. It's liberating to be in a place where no one knows me as the bride who was humiliated. Here I'm just Ashley." The possibility of building a new identity was becoming fundamental to Ashley's healing process. In Denver, Brandon was facing his own rebuilding challenges. His professional reputation had been seriously damaged, forcing him to accept smaller jobs and gradually regain clients' trust. "Brandon," said Mr. Robert during a conversation at the workshop, "you're learning something important. Reputation is built over years and destroyed in minutes." "I know, Dad, but I'm willing to work to rebuild everything from scratch, the right way this time." Brandon's determination to rebuild his life with integrity was being noticed by everyone around him, including Jennifer. The children were developing wonderfully in an environment that finally included a present father figure. Their behavior and mood had improved noticeably. "Ms. Wilson," said Jennifer during a school meeting, "how have the children been behaving lately? I've noticed a very positive change, especially in Ethan. He was more reserved before, but now he participates more in group activities." "And the girls?" "Sophie is more confident in math, and Lily is always telling stories about her daddy. Of course, having a present father figure is doing them good." The teacher's report confirmed what Jennifer had already been observing at home. The children were flourishing with their father's presence. Brandon was discovering simple joys of fatherhood he had never experienced before, helping with homework, reading bedtime stories, attending school presentations. All of this was new to him. "Jennifer," he said after a Father's Day presentation at school, "thank you for giving me this chance." "You're proving you deserve this chance," she replied sincerely. The relationship between Jennifer and Brandon was evolving from hostility and distrust to mutual respect and parental cooperation. Mrs. Dorothy was becoming increasingly important in the children's lives, offering a kind of unconditional love that only grandparents know how to give. "Grandma Dorothy," said Sophie one afternoon, "can you teach me how to make those cookies again?" "Of course, my dear granddaughter, but this time you'll write down the recipe so you don't forget." "So I can teach my kids when I grow up?" "Exactly. That way Grandma's recipe keeps getting passed down from generation to generation." The simple conversation about cookies was actually conveying something much deeper, a sense of family tradition and continuity. Ashley was finding peace in her new life, free from the social pressures of Denver and focused on her professional and personal growth. "Rachel," she said during a phone call, "I think I finally understand what it truly means to be independent." "What do you mean?" "I always thought I needed a man to complete me, to validate my worth. Now I'm learning to find my own validity." Ashley's journey of self-discovery was deep and transformative. Brandon was going through his own journey of self-discovery, learning about fatherhood through everyday experiences with the kids. "Dad," asked Ethan, while they were putting together a puzzle, "why didn't you play with us before?" His son's direct question forced Brandon to confront his own past cowardice in a way no adult had managed to. "Because I was scared, Ethan." "Scared of what?" "Scared of not knowing how to be a good dad. But now I've learned that being a good dad means trying, even when we don't really know how." Brandon's emotional honesty with the children was creating a kind of bond he had never experienced with anyone. Jennifer was watching these interactions with growing admiration for the genuine transformation Brandon was demonstrating. "Carly," she said to her boss, "I wanted to thank you for the flexibility with my schedule. Being able to leave for the kids' school performances means a lot." "Jennifer, happy employees are productive employees, and your children are your priority. I respect that. Carly's understanding was allowing Jennifer to better balance her professional and maternal life, something she had never managed in previous jobs. The children were developing a special relationship with each grandparent. With Mr. Robert, they learned about mechanics and repairs. With Mrs. Dorothy, they discovered cooking and crafts. "Grandpa Robert," asked Lily, "why do you like fixing broken things so much?" "Because by fixing broken things, we learn that almost everything can be mended if we have patience and care." "Like Dad? He was kind of broken, and now he's fixing himself." Lily's innocent question revealed a surprisingly mature insight into the family situation. "That's right, my granddaughter. Just like Dad." Brandon was gradually taking on more meaningful parenting responsibilities, not just visiting, but actively participating in the children's education and discipline. "Jennifer," he said one day, "do you think I could take the kids to spend a weekend with me?" The question represented a significant milestone. Brandon was asking to take on full parental responsibility, even if temporarily. "Do you feel ready for that?" asked Jennifer. "Honestly, I'm nervous. But I want to try. I want them to feel comfortable at my house too." Brandon's admitted nervousness showed he was taking the responsibility seriously, not underestimating the challenge. Ashley was developing new friendships in New York City, people who knew her for her personal and professional qualities, not for her history with Brandon. "It's amazing how I feel more authentic here," she commented to a new co-worker. "Sometimes we need to leave our familiar environment to discover who we really are," replied the co-worker. The observation resonated deeply with Ashley, confirming that her decision to move had been right. Brandon was preparing his house to host the children on weekends, transforming one room into a shared space for the three of them. "Daddy," said Sophie upon seeing the room for the first time, "did you do all this for us?" "Yes, Princess. This is your house too now." The emotion in Brandon's voice was genuine. He was experiencing the joy of providing something special for his children. Jennifer was observing Brandon's progress with a mixture of surprise and satisfaction. The man who had abandoned her while pregnant was transforming into the father the children had always deserved. "Mrs. Dorothy," she said during a conversation, "I never thought I'd say this, but I think Brandon has really changed." "People can change when they face the real consequences of their actions," Mrs. Dorothy replied wisely. "And when they find real motivation to change," Jennifer added. Brandon's transformation wasn't just behavioral, it was fundamentally character-based. The children were loving their weekends at their father's house, creating memories they would carry for a lifetime. "Dad," said Ethan while helping prepare breakfast, "can I invite Grandpa Robert to come here too?" "Of course you can, champ. This house belongs to our whole family." The natural inclusion of grandparents in family plans showed how Brandon was developing a broader and more mature view of family. Ashley was gradually opening up to the possibility of new relationships, but now with completely different criteria. "I don't want someone who looks perfect on paper anymore," she explained to Rachel. "I want someone who's genuinely good, even if they're not impressive on the surface." Ashley's shift in values was a direct result of the painful but valuable lesson she had learned from Brandon. Jennifer was receiving an even better job offer, this time as a junior partner at Carly's firm. "Jennifer," said Carly, "your dedication and competence have impressed all our clients. Would you like to become my partner?" The offer was a dream Jennifer had never dared to have, from employee to partner in less than a year. "I accept," she replied, hardly believing her own luck. "It's not luck," Carly corrected. "It's merit. You earned this." Professional recognition was giving Jennifer a financial and emotional security she had never experienced before. Brandon was learning to balance his professional responsibilities with his parental obligations, something completely new for him. "Tyler," he said, "I need to reschedule our meeting. It's Sophie's dance recital at school." "Man, I barely recognize you," Tyler joked. "A year ago, you would have rescheduled the recital for the meeting." "A year ago, I was a different person," Brandon replied seriously. Brandon's shift in priorities was evident to everyone who knew him. The children were developing in an environment of love and stability that finally included both parents, each contributing uniquely to their lives. "Mommy," said Lily one evening. "I think we're a real family now." "Why do you think that, my princess?" "Because we have you, Dad, Grandpa Robert, Grandma Dorothy, and everyone cares about each other." Lily's perception of the family dynamic showed how well the children had adapted to the new configuration. Jennifer smiled upon hearing her daughter's words. Maybe Lily was right. Maybe they had actually managed to create something that could be called a real family. Ashley was finding fulfillment in helping other women going through situations similar to hers, offering support through a support group she had helped form. "It's amazing how turning our pain into help for others can be healing," she commented during a group session. The other participants agreed, recognizing in Ashley's story a source of inspiration for their own recovery journeys. Brandon was discovering that being a father wasn't just a role to play, but a complete transformation of identity and priorities. "Jennifer," he said after a few months of the new routine, "I want you to know that I will never be able to fully make up for the years I lost, but I want to spend the rest of my life trying." "Brandon," she replied, "the important thing isn't to make up for the past. It's to be present in the future." Jennifer's wisdom was helping Brandon focus his energy constructively on what could still be built. Mr. Robert and Mrs. Dorothy were experiencing a second youth through their time with their grandchildren, rediscovering joys they had forgotten. "Robert," Mrs. Dorothy said one evening, "have you noticed how much more colorful our lives have become since we met our grandchildren?" "I have. They brought a joy I didn't even know was missing." The positive impact of the grandchildren on the grandparents' lives was mutual and deeply enriching. The children were growing up in an environment where they were loved unconditionally by multiple parental figures, each contributing uniquely to their development. Ashley was gradually considering the possibility of visiting Denver again, not to go back, but to make peace with her past. "Rachel," she said, "I think I'm ready to go back there, even if it's just to prove to myself that I've overcome all of that." "Are you sure?" "I am. And who knows, maybe I'll even run into Jennifer. I'd like to talk to her in person without all that church tension." The possibility of Ashley and Jennifer talking as two women who had overcome a traumatic experience caused by the same man was intriguing. Brandon was developing family traditions with the children, creating positive memories that would gradually replace the absence of the early years. "Every Saturday morning," he told the children, "we'll make pancakes together. It can be our special tradition." "And can each of us pick a different ingredient?" Sophie asked excitedly. "Yes, you can. We can try new flavors every week." The creation of family traditions was helping Brandon truly establish himself as part of his children's daily lives. Jennifer was impressed with the consistency of Brandon's change. It had been almost a year since the incident at the church, and he maintained his commitment to the children without fail. "Carly," she said to her business partner, "do you remember when I told you that whole story about my children's father?" "How could I forget? It was one of the most dramatic stories I've ever heard." "Well, he really has changed. He's being a present and truly responsible father." "Sometimes people need a reality check to find their true character," observed Carly. Carly's reflection echoed Jennifer's thoughts about the human capacity for genuine change. Ashley was returning to Denver for a planned visit, feeling strong enough to confront her past in a healthy way. She decided to look for Jennifer at the accounting office, where she had learned she worked. The conversation between the two women would be an important healing moment for both. "Jennifer," Ashley said hesitantly as she entered the office. "Ashley?" Jennifer stood up, surprised but with a genuine smile. "I hope I'm not bothering you. I wanted to talk to you." "Of course, let's go to a more private room." The meeting between the two women would be a defining moment in both of their stories of overcoming. "Jennifer," Ashley began, "I came here to thank you." "Thank me? For what?" "For saving me from a marriage that would have been a disaster. For showing Ricardo's true character before I made the biggest mistake of my life." Helena's genuine gratitude deeply touched Fernanda. "Helena, I didn't do that thinking of you. I did it thinking of my children." "I know. And that makes your gesture even more admirable. You were protecting your kids, not trying to harm me." The conversation between them was revealing the mutual respect that had developed despite the difficult circumstances. "How are the children?" asked Helena, genuinely interested. They're wonderful. Ricardo, well, he's really changed. He's being a truly present father. That makes me happy. Not for him, but for them. All children deserve to have a father who loves them. The emotional maturity both women had developed was evident in the natural flow of the conversation. And you, Helena? How are you? I'm fine. Much better, actually. I moved to New York City. I'm working as an architect. I've met new people. I'm discovering who I really am when I'm not trying to be the person someone wants me to be. Helena's account of her self-discovery journey inspired Fernanda. You know, said Fernanda, I went through that too. For years I defined myself as the woman who was abandoned. Now I define myself as the woman who overcame and thrived. The two talked for over an hour, sharing their journeys of overcoming and personal growth. It was a meeting of two strong women who had transformed a traumatic experience into growth. When Helena prepared to leave, Fernanda made an unexpected invitation. Helena, would you like to meet the children? They're really special. Would you mind? Not at all. I think it would be good for them to know you as you really are, not as the person they saw that day at the church. Fernanda's invitation for Helena to meet the children represented an extraordinary level of maturity and forgiveness. When Helena met Ethan, Sophie, and Lily, she was delighted with each one's unique personality. You're very special children, she said sincerely. Are you the pretty lady who was with Daddy at the church? Asked Lily with typical childlike curiosity. Yes, I am, Princess, but now your Daddy and I are just friends. That's good, said Sophie. Now Daddy is just being his real daddy with us. The innocence of Sophie's observation brought smiles to both Helena and Fernanda. Ricardo arrived to pick up the children and was surprised to see Helena talking animatedly with them. Helena, he said, visibly uncomfortable, I didn't know you were in town. Hi, Ricardo. I came to visit some friends and wanted to meet your daughters. They're wonderful children. They are, he replied, proud but still embarrassed. The interaction between Helena and Ricardo was cordial but distant, demonstrating that both had moved on in a healthy way. After Ricardo left with the children, Helena turned to Fernanda. Thank you for letting me meet them. They're truly special. Thank you for coming. It was important for me, too. The two women said goodbye with a sincere hug, representing the definitive closure of a painful chapter and the beginning of an unexpected friendship. Helena returned to New York City with a feeling of complete peace. She had confronted her past, reconciled with the traumatic events, and even developed a genuine friendship with the woman she initially saw as a rival. Fernanda continued her life with a renewed sense of strength and purpose. The meeting with Helena had shown that it was possible to transform conflict into understanding, pain into growth. Ricardo continued dedicating himself to fatherhood with consistency and genuine love, finally understanding that his true fulfillment came from being a good father, not from impressing other people. The children grew up in an environment of abundant love, emotional security, and stability, developing into confident and caring individuals. Mr. Robert and Mrs. Dorothy continued to be devoted grandparents, finding in their time with their grandchildren the joy and purpose that gave special meaning to their golden years. 2 years after the incident at the church, all the people involved had found their own particular peace and fulfillment. Brandon's attempt to humiliate Jennifer had turned into an opportunity for everyone to discover their best selves. Ashley was engaged again, this time to a man who genuinely loved her and respected her independence. Jennifer had expanded her business and become a respected entrepreneur in Denver. Brandon had become the father he should have been from the start. On a Sunday afternoon, during a barbecue at Mr. Robert and Mrs. Dorothy's house, the whole family was gathered. The children played in the backyard, the adults chatted animatedly, and a sense of completeness filled the air. You know, Jennifer said to Brandon as they watched the children play, I never thought I'd see the day when I'd say this, but I think everything happened the way it was supposed to in the end. How so? Asked Brandon. If you hadn't invited me to that church, if you hadn't tried to humiliate me, maybe I never would have found the courage to demand that you take responsibility. The children would never have known you as a father. They would never have known their grandparents. And I never would have become the person I am today, Brandon added. Ironically, my attempt to hurt you ended up saving me. And making me stronger, Jennifer added. The two watched in thoughtful silence as the children played with their grandparents, realizing they had managed to build something beautiful from a situation that started so destructively. "Daddy! Mommy!" shouted Lily from the backyard. "Come play with us." "Shall we?" Brandon asked Jennifer. "Let's go," she smiled. And so, together but as respectful co-parents, they joined their children and grandparents for an afternoon of family fun, celebrating the unique and special family they had managed to build despite all the adversity. The story that began with lies, abandonment, and an attempt at humiliation had transformed into a beautiful tale of redemption, forgiveness, and true family love. End of story. Now tell us what you thought of the story and where you're watching from. If you have something to share with us, leave your sincere words in the comments. Do you believe Brandon really changed or still had doubts about his transformation? We'd love to read your opinion. Thank you so much for your company. Don't forget to leave your like and, most importantly, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other moving stories.